next person is Lionel, M-E-N-A-A-D.
Lionel Menard, Lionel-M-E-N-A-R-D. I'm from Kennebunk, and frankly, I came to this meeting to understand exactly, or try to understand what this process is going to be. I'm probably the least informed person in this room, and but I'd like to make informed decisions. I really appreciate your time, as well as America First for coming. Because, you know, we heard from a lot of non-resident NGOs this afternoon, and, you know, this, however this works out, this will have an impact. I heard Rachel's comment earlier regarding, you know, the number of people who voted for it, and, you know, she didn't, I guess, appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people who would like to see the dam stay and or some other compromise as to what is actually going to happen, so there can be a balance between the environmental concerns that have been brought up, as well as the recreational and financial concerns of the residents of this town. You know, I'm on the river pretty frequently, and, you know, frankly, I enjoy it. And we've talked a lot about the quote studies. I was very impressed with this document that you handed out today, because it really gave me a good timeline as to, hopefully it doesn't scare America First away, frankly, because everybody talks about studies, and I don't know who's paying for these studies. And, you know, if it's all going to be the burden on the, you know, it's very easy to get up here and for me or somebody else to say, well, we need to study on this, we need to study on this. And as we've heard today, there hasn't been, even though we have had all these interested groups here, there haven't been thorough enough studies. I mean, we could be studying this forever, so either we'll miss the dates, or it'll cost, frankly, too much money for anybody to be ever interested in getting involved with this, you know, with this project. So I'm glad FERC is here, because, you know, they have, the way I read this, after everybody's input, they have the final say in terms of what these studies are going to be and how they're going to be done. But I really would like to know who's going to pay for all these studies, especially since a lot of them haven't been done yet. And can you answer my question?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, traditionally the applicant is responsible for the studies, but we do have to consider if there is maybe there won't be no need for studies if there's already studies that are already done. So
well, I'm sorry.
That could mitigate some of the cost of the studies if there's existing information for questions that the study would look for.
No, I heard you ask for the request for studies because, I mean, obviously that's important, but I also heard several people come up here and say there haven't been enough studies done. And so if, you know, and I just wanted to confirm that the burden is going to be on America First once FERC agrees with America First that where the money is going to have to come from for these studies. And then they might find that this is just not financially viable, frankly. But then, and you answered, I think you answered half of the question that, my other half of the question was, okay, great, America First goes away. Now, who's going to do all these studies? Still, they're going to need to be done, because you can't just, well, I don't think you can just take these dams out without doing any studies. And who pays for those studies? And frankly, they should be almost the same studies as we're talking about with America First. So, who pays for those studies? And you may not want to answer that question, but is it KLPD who's going to pay for the studies in order to take the dam down?
That would be a different proceeding.
I understand that. I understand that.
So whoever is the applicant for the proceeding would be responsible. But I'd point you to that slide. It's interesting that we have it up. One of the bulleted criteria is for us to consider the level of effort and cost. So we're considering costs. It's not just That's one of the.
Oh, I know,
criteria
that-
we're gonna
And
consider.
that's why I really appreciate the schedule, but, to get all the study dispute determinations done by October is really moving along.
It's a pretty tight.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, I appreciate your time and efforts, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next person is Alex Mendel.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Mendelson, Mendelsohn. And I really appreciate meeting with federal agencies. It's quite unusual. I've worked as a volunteer in the state-sanctioned Kennebunk Conservation Commission for over 2 decades. I'm not in that commission anymore. I have a baccalaureate degree with honors in human ecology, studied under Dr. George Nava. And I have 33 years of experience in electrical engineering and electronics, so I can fully appreciate what Mr. Ashley has to say about some of the things that have to do with hydroelectric generation. Those are some of my credentials. I recently met with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we met with a lot of scientists here in the state of Maine. And the takeaway that I took from that meeting was something that I knew already, but that had to do with evidence. There's a lot of hearsay, there's a lot of conjecture, there is a lot of politicization. I think Rachel Phipps discussed how that was covered in the election a year or 2 ago. So I'm well grounded in evidence. And of course, there are studies, and they cost a lot of money. We have spent thousands and thousands of dollars. You can refer to the select board here in town to see how many thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, $45,000 here, $25,000 there, how much this town has spent of my taxpayer money in determining the evidence based on studies. So as far as the effort and cost of the study, a lot of it has already been done. And I guess you gentlemen are aware of that. I brought to the attention in a very informal meeting that thankfully our great selectmen have held meetings on Saturday mornings where we have coffee and we sit around and speak breeze. And I brought to the attention of the select board and the other members who came to that informal meeting no less than 5 studies. I mean, going on studies that have already been done. One was by Dr. Lynn Lewis, Economics Department Chair at Bates College. Another one was done by the Office of Coastal Zone Management, done by the Division of Ecological Restoration in conjunction with the Department of Fish and Game's Riverways Program and the Wetlands Restoration Program. Another study that I cited was done by American Rivers and Trout Unlimited, who you've already heard from. And there was another scientific study in 2006 by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And what these studies showed unequivocally is that after dam removal, property values stayed the same, or they went up. None of these studies indicated that property values went down. Well, at my informal meeting with the selectmen, the former director of the Kennebunk Light Power District got up and refuted these studies, saying, oh, there are contradictory studies, but I have not seen the evidence. So I thank you very much for coming to chat with us, and I do assume that you will always look at the evidence, because that's all we have to go, is what work has already been done. There are a lot of studies that have already been done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last person on the list is Jeff Bearden.
Thank you. It's Jeff Reardon, Jeff, F-F-R-E-Y, Reardon, R-E-A-R-D-O-N. I live in Manchester, and I'm speaking on behalf of Trout Unlimited. For scoping, a couple of things I just want you to be aware of. Mousam is a fairly unique resource. I've been working on hydropower projects in Maine since 1994. This is the first time, not the first time somebody's suggested that I should, but it's the first time I felt comfortable coming to a public meeting and saying you need to be thinking about the impacts of this project on sea-run brook trout, which are a unique and fairly rare resource that are present along the East Coast, from Long Island to Maine. Again, there's certainly some potential that they might have been at sometime in history in the main stem Kennebunk and the main stem Penobscot, and subject to some of the licensings that have happened there in the last 20 years. But here, I think there's a very good chance, based on the fact that just upstream, in fact, discharging into these impoundments through streams that hold wild brook trout, are two of Maine's heritage brook trout ponds. So in terms of these are ponds that have never been stocked with brook trout, continue to maintain wild populations of brook trout. Maine's got about 568 of them, of which 2 are in the coastal plain in southern Maine. The only 2 are just upstream of the Kesslen Dam. So there's a really high potential for brook trout here. You should also be aware that this is one of the few main stem rivers in southern Maine that the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture has assessed as containing an existing population of sea-run brook trout, which frankly is somewhat amazing given the level of impact and warming, not just from these dams, but from development that, a lot of southern Maine has lost its brook trout. The Mousam River has not. Similarly, the sea-run fish resources, I think somebody earlier today said it's kind of amazing to think about there being alewives or blueback herring or shad in this river. But they've been here since I was a kid. I grew up just north of here, about half an hour north, 40 minutes north of Cape Elizabeth. When I was a kid, the Mousam River was one of 2 places in Maine that we came to recreational shadfish. The other was Narragansett Lake, which was a lot farther from home. So I've been spending time here since I got my driver's license in 1983, and coming to the Mousam to shadfish like many other people have. It's fairly amazing, given how little river is left between the Kesslen Dam and tidewater. That shad population has maintained itself at the quality and numbers that it has, but it has. So I think there's some fairly unique resources here that I'd like to ask you to pay attention to. In terms of issues you've identified in the scoping document, I do have a few comments. One of which is, I think normally in these documents, I would have seen a section labeled water quality and quantity. And I don't know if that's subsumed in your aquatic resources category. And I think you identified the major water quality issues in terms of dissolved oxygen, fish habitat, aquatic invertebrate habitat, but I want to flag the water quantity question. The PAD from the applicant describes this river as free-flowing. Knowing what I do about how, when I spent a lot of time down here 25 years ago, Estes Lake and Mousam Lake were operated, I do not think the river above here is free-flowing. So with respect to relicensing these for run-of-river operation, I think it's important that we understand what that means in terms of whether flows are regulated at relatively large impoundments upstream of here. We definitely need some information about that. I didn't see it in either the applicant's document or the PAD, and I think that's going to be a significant hole in the analysis, for example, for fishery studies, which are going to depend on knowing what seasonal flows are, et cetera. With respect to threatened and endangered species, it strikes me that you've got a very short list. There are a lot of species that are listed here, and I'm not looking here to have you list every state and federally listed species. I suspect brown bat, it's a little brown bat, that's the bat species you have.
The long-eared.
Long-eared bat. I suspect they're present here. I think the other species you mentioned was Canada lynx. I'd be very surprised if you saw Canada lynx down here, and I think everybody else in the state would too. But I think there are some other listed species, the ones that I know about are aquatic species that wouldn't surprise me so much. Most head-of-tide licensings that I've participated in have analyzed the effects of the project on short-nosed and Atlantic sturgeon, both of which I believe are federally threatened listed. 2 state-listed fish species, which may or may not be present in the Mousam, but it wouldn't be surprising, at least if redfin pickerel was, which is a state-listed fish species. I should coordinate, I'd ask you to probably Mary Gallagher, the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, would be the person to talk to about that. And the other state-listed species that might be present here, and I know nothing about their biology, so I have no idea if it's reasonable to expect them to be in the Mousam or not, is swamp turtle. And there may be some potential that they'd be here. The other T&E species that come up a lot in dam licensings, and I don't know the Mousam well enough to know if they'd be here, but it would be worth taking a look, are several species of state-listed freshwater mussels, in particular tidewater mucket and yellow lamp mussel have come up in multiple licensings that have happened in Maine. I think their distribution is more towards central Maine. They may not be present this far south in the state. But another species that has at least been discussed in terms of being listed, but I don't know if it's been added, would be the brook floater mussel. And I would suspect that given some of the freshwater habitat, at least in the Mousam watershed, brook floater would be present and would likely be present in the impounded reaches where they're not impounded. And I think, finally, and perhaps this doesn't come in at this stage, but it certainly will when you write your EA, with respect to, I don't know if you're looking for information at this point about the need for power, but I guess I'd like to emphasize the relatively small amount of generation with these projects, and I was surprised to hear this afternoon that the Kesslen Dam is no longer operating. One of the things to think about if enhancements to increase generation are on the table of these projects is the difficulty of accessing some of these powerhouses to do that sort of work. You got invited to Duffy's to enjoy a meal, and I highly recommend it. Had lunch there on my way here. My understanding is if somebody were to need to do turbine maintenance, that turbine would have to come out through the floor of what's now Duffy's restaurant. So in terms of the feasibility of these projects seeing significant power enhancements or even repair if they're not operating now, I think there's some legitimate issues there if that's in the cards in the licensing plans. And I appreciate your time and thank you for coming up to me.
Thanks for your comments. Also, I just wanted to clarify that it might be worded slightly differently than you're used to seeing, but we will look at flows and any effect that the project has on regulating them. And when we discuss the existing condition that the projects exist on, any regulation of flows through the upstream areas and downriver from the lowest dam, we'll discuss all that in as close detail as we can. This project, as far as I know, we have site visits tomorrow, but it does not have bypass reaches, which makes it slightly different than a lot of the hydro projects we work on. And but we will be looking at both water quality and quantity and any regulation of flows in the project reach.
I think, again, this is just my, and there may be information out that I'm not aware of. I think the water quantity issue is going to be difficult because, again, unlike other large basins that I've worked in, I don't think there's a USGS gauge to tell you what's coming in above these projects in the mouse. I may be wrong about that, and there may be some historic gauging, but I do think, based on the configuration of dams upstream, there's fairly significant regulation here. So understanding what's coming in seasonally is important to thinking about what the impacts are going to be on fish and what minimum flows are appropriate and achievable. Again, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad I have a business and I just arrived to deliver some prepared remarks on this. But my name is Curtis Wilder. I'm a 42-year resident of Kennebunk.
Spell your name, please.
Curtis Milder, M-I-L-D-N-E-R. And that's a 42-year resident, not 42 years old. Seen a lot more than that. I have several points to make, and I'll read from prepared remarks so I get them right. I have canoed and fished the Mousam River, both in the impoundment and the free-flowing area below the Kesslen Dam, with friends and families for many, many years. The river and the experience in it are very important to me. It's interesting, I was also involved in the 1970s in a federally funded project to identify opportunities for low-head hydropower in New England. So I helped map dams, convene conference, and encourage the redevelopment of disused dams and hydropower. One of the communities that I worked with was Kennebunk and the opportunity at the Kesslen Dam. So my background goes all the way back to the 70s on this. I was then and am now a proponent of environmentally friendly power generation. So this background kind of gives me a unique experience both as a user and as someone who understands a little bit about hydropower. And I just have 3 points to make. And the first is really about the Mousam River hydropower economics. It was pretty clear to me from my first analysis of data provided by Kennebunk and Light and Power that hydropower on the Mousam was not and is unlikely to be financially attractive. In order to generate any net income, expenses for dam operations needed to be minimized. And that is how they operated it for many years with doing as little as possible. It's not maintenance, it's not automated. It's a very simple hand-operated operation. But even with this, the dams generate little more than the amount of funds to generate a good used car. So I want to point out to this board that all the discussions we're having about dams relate to economics, which are very marginal. If you modernize the hydropower and generate more power, or to generate more power more efficiently, the capital costs eat up any gains. And there's really no way to sugarcoat this. The operating hydropower on the Mousam is a loser. It is barely effective as it is, and with the kind of improvements that are necessary for the long-term operation of dams, it makes it even more suspect. The other issue I want to bring up is about restoring an impaired river. For me, licensing presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restore the river to its natural state. And the current state of the river is just plain unacceptable. And this is just not my assessment. In 2014, the State Department of Environmental Protection assessed the water quality of Maine rivers. And this is a copy of the cover piece of the report. And on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 meets all water quality standards, the Mousam was rated a 4, or impaired. Now, there are some 32,000 miles of river in Maine, but only 1,300 miles, or just 4.2%, are rated as impaired. So this distinction for a river in my hometown is not something I'm proud of. And I see this relicensing as an opportunity to restore the river, in fact, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which is why I'm standing here and I've taken time for my business today. The third area I want to talk about briefly is the appearance of the river. And this has been a key issue, and I'm sure in hearings tonight you'll be hearing a lot about it. There is among some residents, particularly among those who live on or near the river, a great deal of hysteria, and the word hysteria comes from many articles in the press about the restoration of the river. This hysteria seems to be based on fear, but not fact. And the abutters cite 2 major concerns that get them excited. One is the loss of property value if the dams and impoundment are removed. There is data from other communities that removed dams and restored rivers that show this is not the case. This has not at all dissuaded opponents. And if you think about it, it makes very little sense that property on an impoundment would have a higher value than a waterfront property on a free-flowing river. Again, the opinions of the abutters are largely based on a fear of something that may not be true. There is also great concern about the appearance of the river, and misleading information has been circulated about what the river would look like if dams were removed. This has further led to hysteria. On 2 or 3 occasions, the Kesslen Dam has been open for dam maintenance, and the flow of water stopped from the dams above, like turning off a faucet. The water was allowed to flow through the dams below. Obviously, what appeared was an empty riverbed with hundreds of years of accumulated sediment at the bottom. Based on this view of the drained river, opponents have described the Mousam as the mudsum. That's a term you will find if you do some research. They say, and they likely believe, that without the dams, the flow will be a trickle and the bottom will be a mudflat. Of course, this is not the case. Without dams, spring freshets will wash away the mud and will over time scour the river bottom. The riverbed will become rocks and sandbar until it reaches the tides. Vegetation will quickly return to areas that are not in the main channel. The flow will be natural with more volume in the spring and less in the late summer and fall, but it will never be a trickle. There are places in the river, immediately below the Kesslen, Twine Mill, and other dams where the flow is more natural. These are picturesque stretches of river that anyone can see if they want to take a walk. In these places, the river winds its way over rock outcroppings with both shallow places and deep pools. This is what the Mousam can be. So kind of in a summary here, it gets to the point. As I get it, the abutters to the river are fearful of what might happen to the rivers. Others like me see relicensing as an opportunity to get it right for future generations. Literally, for me, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For this reason, I implore FERC to require those who wish to relicense the dams to thoroughly document the impacts and the advantages of dam removal. I am concerned about pressure to short-circuit the process and to minimize thorough fact-gathering. Facts must be the basis for relicensing decisions. High-quality assessments are absolutely necessary. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, but thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
That ends the list of folks indicating that they would like to speak. Are there anyone else? Is there anyone else? Please state your name.
Bill McDavid, McDavitt. I work under contract to NOAA Fisheries Service in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Really, all my questions are pretty much procedural. Tomorrow, the environmental site review is still on, even given the weather, the snow and rain in the forecast.
We haven't seen that.
Okay, all right, okay, great. Next one, I just really don't want to make any predictions, but it seems as though there is some possibility of a government shutdown. I don't know, do you have any policy or does anybody know how the schedule may or may not change if there's a shutdown?
Yeah,
well, in terms of the 60-day comment period,
Steve Gibson.
I think, recalling from another proceeding where a previous federal shutdown affected comment, I'm thinking of Kennebunk here, I believe that affected the comment period, and in that case, the commission did extend things because of that, but we'll just see what happens here. And yeah, there would be an announcement to everyone that would be public, would make everyone aware that the schedule had changed if that happened.
Okay, great. And then the third one, I realize we're here for scoping for the America First proposal. What if I could just simply ask a procedural question on the 5362 KLPD side? I realize that they put in a notice to not renew. I just don't know if procedurally there's anything more we can expect on the docket. Are you kind of done with it, or can we expect anything else on that side? Does anybody know what there might be a notice?
Yeah, until surrender application has been filed, that's pretty much where it stands, is that NOI. But for now, our focus is this project, 4856, is the process that ILP until, like I said earlier, 2022 is when surrender application review. But for now, our focus is 14486.
Great. Thanks much.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sorry, was it Bill McDevitt? Todd Shea, Kennebunk Lake Power. We're actively monitoring the current license applicant and that process. KLPD's board has yet to come forward with any additional information, but we will actively be seeking out avenues that we will proceed with should something happen in the current 14856. And we're in Maine. I'm doing the environmental site review. I'll be at come hell or high water, I'll be there. So very court tomorrow morning. We're not going inside the facilities, but it'll be an external environmental site review. I recommend wearing boots.
Thank you. Are there? Yes.
Hi, my name is Susan Bloomfield, BLOOMFIELD. I'm a resident and a ratepayer. My question is, I'm fully supportive of every study that's deemed required. I'm wondering if the applicant balks at this responsibility, where does that leave us?
We, as a commission, would issue the study plan determination, and that letter states that the following studies are required to be done for information purposes for putting together the EA. And so if, for instance, just to give you an example of other proceedings, if studies are delayed or something happens where we can't get the information we need, then the license proceeding would not be able to go forward in terms of our environmental review. So we need that information to go forward. That's just how it would stand, is if we say that the information is required, then it's required.
And if they are not able to meet their responsibility or wish not to, what happens?
We would consider the circumstances of them not being able to meet that responsibility. So, I mean, it would be circumstantial as to whether or not it was based on inclement weather, anomalous study results, there are variations on the theme as to what could happen. We would just address it upon the circumstances.
So there's a possibility that they could forfeit their application, or you would forfeit it for them.
I think we would just generally cross that bridge when we come to it, so to speak. I cannot tell you, because we are in pre-filing still, and just remember the dates. So according to, this might help, according to our statute, a application has to be filed 2 years before the license expires. So they have to file that license application. And we would see what information we have at that time. If we don't have enough information to accept the license application and move forward with the environmental review, then we would just be at that stage where we would have process that wasn't completely informed. We have a process that is in place for, the schedule produced, and so if they can't undertake the studies, then the license proceeding would just basically be held in place, and the license would basically expire, and we would have to take appropriate recourse to be able to establish how to proceed forward with this proceeding. So it'd be basically phased, right? So we're in pre-filing, we have to wait until post-filing and just evaluate the circumstances as to the occasion.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, John Redmond. I had a methodological question, if I might, in terms of scoping. With your economics staff and your cost-benefit methodology, will you be taking into account any increase in recreational benefits that might occur if the dams are removed? Would that be within your scope? And the reason I bring that up is that I think in terms of pricing assets, that there's a long precedent, I guess going all the way back to the Hells Canyon case, where the value of recreational assets tend to increase much more rapidly than the value of energy assets. And so dam removal is going to be costed out. That part of the benefits of that should be in attention to the increase in recreational benefits. And the methodological issue becomes how they will be treated from a price cost going forward, what the present value will be over the license term. And I'd like to just make sure that you guys are aware that that would be an issue in terms of the cost benefit of dam removal versus hydro operations.
Yeah, the purpose for economic analysis is to compare the cost of the project power versus the likely alternative. And so we'll be looking at the cost of mitigation measures versus what the project costs from an alternative energy point of view. So could you clarify if what do you mean by recreational benefits? Is like new recreational features or?
Yes, for example, there used to be shad running here. And there are towns up and down the East Coast, including here in Maine, that had shad festivals. Like tens of thousands of people come from all over. So there's potential potential for a great deal of local revenue to be generated from that type of thing. If we're enough kayaking, there's stretches of the Mousam now that I believe will qualify for wild and scenic river status already. If the dams come out and that river is fully restored aesthetically, that I think that there will be miles more of the river that qualify for wild and scenic river status. So that if that was the case, that's going to draw people from all over the region. So I think that in terms of valuing the dam removal alternative, it's important for you to look at the recreational issue. And in pricing those two alternatives, I think the value of those recreational assets need to be priced at a much faster rate of value increase than energy. We have Energy Information Administration, which is a very well-respected set of energy estimates, is projecting that electricity costs in New England won't move much over the next 40 years. However, the value of recreational assets here will be much, much higher. So when you talk with your economists, I think that's an issue that's of relevance and of real importance. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Yes.
It's Peter Ashley again. The information that comes down over the years, as I spoke about before, there are inaccuracies in there, and since we're collecting as much as we can right now to set everything kind of straight. Very often when the Twine Mill is described, they talk about the 66-inch diameter butterfly valve operated by the hydraulic governor as a throttling device. That turbine was never designed as a variable output machine like a Kesslen or a Francis runner. It's either on or off. And I designed and built and installed a pond control that does that. It costs less than $150 because I use secondhand stuff. So when you push the button for it to go, there's a delay. Make sure everything's running great and all the pressures are correct. And then it starts up, and it starts up within about 14 seconds. When it first starts up, you hear the rumbling, and as the air is displaced from the machine, and as it approaches full open, it smooths right out, and no cavitation or anything. And that's when the way the machine is operated. You push the stop, the butterfly closes, and the machine stops. That has been sprinkled. That misinformation of throttling at the Twine Mill is completely incorrect. If you try and throttle it, you'll destroy the machine, and the universals and the gear box as well. The other thing is that, as I said before, I've been interested in hydroelectric my whole life. So I grew up between Newton Upper Falls and Newton Lower Falls in the Charles River, and used to kayak and chase the turtles, etc. And learned as much as I could and enjoyed the whole affair. Downstream from there was Norumbega Park that was serviced by the electric trolley run by the hydroelectric. And it went from Boston out to Norumbega Park, the dance pavilion there. And there were 3 different canoe companies, and when the river was full on a weekend, I mean full of canoes. The recreation at that scene was phenomenal. And the advent of small vessels, you can see them on the cars going down the main turnpike, is really increased in the last 3 years. You'll see all kinds of watercraft going down the road, and people go wherever they wish. They launch their canoe, kayak, whatever, and have a great weekend. And This is vacation land. You see it on every single license plate. My wife's uncle passed that bill in the State House and got vacation land on the ball and got it moving. So there's really a big insurgence in this area. When you paddle up the river, you'll see lots of canoes on either side of the river. And the best place to canoe is about Dane Perkins because you've got 2.5 miles or so of beautiful scenery, and you sometimes see deer and turkeys and et cetera. That's enough. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Again, Alex Mendelson. With respect to Peter Ashley's remarks, there was a nationally well-respected study known as the implant economic model. The gentleman maybe have to look it up. It indicates that if restoring the Mousam created 2 jobs in the leisure and hospitality industry, the increase in local income is likely to exceed, on a continuing, ongoing basis, the local income benefits of hydro. So, for example, the analysis indicates 2 jobs. Looking at it, it's selling fuel, hotels, motels, restaurants, kayaks, canoes, fishing gear, what have you. You know, the list goes on and on, as Mr. Ashley indicated. We'd add over almost $200,000 annually to local income, whereas hydro, unless America First comes up with something really revolutionary and the return on investment is realistic, it's probably half of that, according to the land study.
Okay. If there are no additional questions, I'd just like to remind you that comments on America First verification document is due January 7th, 2018, as well as request for studies. And if there are no other questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation.